lot of things for us to look at today. And if we do not get to one of them, well, that's what the blended part of this class is. You can look at that online at your leisure. But the two main topics I want to cover are jQuery and associated with jQuery, there's jQuery UI. And then I want to cover mobile application, not mobile applications, but viewing your web page in a mobile browser, such as iPhone, Android, so on. All right. I know we did not have a lecture last week, and last week was sort of, you were to look at the introduction to jQuery. Do you have questions about jQuery? Is it clear what jQuery is? All right. To refresh everyone's memory, jQuery is like a shorthand for JavaScript. jQuery is JavaScript, but someone created a library of functions that you can use instead of having to write them out all the way in JavaScript. So we're going to look a little bit at it, and then you can use the reference to delve into it deeper if there's something that you want to do. So for example, the jQuery tutorial. This is a way that you can add a click function to every paragraph on your page. If you think about how you do this in JavaScript, that would be very difficult. It would be very involved, let's put it that way. I don't know if it would be difficult per se, but it would take a lot of work. You would have to do one of two things. You'd either have to write an on-click event for every paragraph, on-click do this, on-click do that. And if you added a paragraph, you'd have to add the on-click to that as well. Then you'd have to write code to process it, all right? In this case, what you do is you simply say you don't have any on-click events. You simply say when the document is ready. In other words, when the web page finishes loading, do this. And what are we doing? We're taking every paragraph and we're adding a click function to it. And what does the click function do? It hides the paragraph. So let's look at this. So notice there's no on-click events on these. This is actually a purer way to write JavaScript because then your JavaScript is 100% an entity unto itself and doesn't involve any intermingling with HTML. You don't have that on-click event on there. So when the page finished loading, all right, create a click function for when you click on every paragraph. This is a selector that means every paragraph. All right. So if we were doing this in pure JavaScript, you'd have to say get element by tag and ask for the paragraphs and then loop through the list of paragraphs and add each one. Here, this does all that for you. And what does it do? Well, it hides a particular paragraph that we click on. So we can click on that, and get rid of it. I don't know how we get them back. Maybe there'd be a restore button or something like that. But the important things to do is to see how this is a shorthand way of referring to all the elements that match a particular selector. Let's look at some of the other things that they have with jQuery. All right, we use the correct selector to hide all the P elements, and as we saw, that would be by just putting a P in there. Submit answer, show answer. Oh, that is the answer. Oh, I got that one correct. Good. That was a little confusing. And then there's more that we can do as well. Some information about it, getting started. And this is probably the important one. The basic syntax for jQuery statements are the $. You have a selector in the parentheses, and then you have some function or action that you want to do to it. All right. A selector is very similar to the selectors we use in CSS, right? In CSS, we have selectors where we could say for every paragraph, style it a certain way. Well, same here. For every paragraph, add this particular behavior. And again, it works just the same. This would be whatever current element we had. P would be to hide all the paragraph elements. This would be to hide all the elements that have a class of test. This would be to hide the element with an ID of test. Jquery uses CSS syntax, so it's already good. All right. Document ready event is used because what we want to do is we don't want to start executing JavaScript until the entire page is loaded, right? If we try to execute JavaScript before the page is loaded, we could run into troubles because we could be trying to access something that doesn't exist yet on the page. Now, I realize pages load very quickly, but there is an amount of time that it takes for a page to load, all right? This might have been, well, no, there's still a purpose for this now. Probably the purpose was more easily demonstrated back in the old days when the connection speed was a lot slower. All right, but this makes sure the page is loaded before we go ahead and proceed. This allows us to define a function. All right. More about selectors. We could have a button that says, after the page loads, we're going to add a click function to every button on the page so that when the button is clicked, it hides every paragraph. Now, this probably only works because we have one button, right? If we had multiple buttons, we probably don't want every button to do this. We probably want one button to do this and maybe another button to show them back, all right? But as we click this, hides the paragraphs, all right? ID selector, class selector. More examples. This would select all the elements, current element. This would be any P element that has the class of intro. This would be the first paragraph on the page. This would be the first list item in every UL on the page. This would be the first child, which would also be an LI, right? Select all the elements with an href attribute. And there's a bunch of selectors. A nice one is select even and odd rows because you might have, that's the effective even in CSS, because you might want to show or hide, or not show or hide, but make different colors, the even and odd rows so it's easier to see going across. Just like in JavaScript, we can put our jQuery stuff in its own file. And finally, events that we can code. We can code a click, a double click, a mouse entered, or a mouse leave. So again, in this case, we can say p click means that when the paragraphs are clicked, and then we can put this syntax here to be the function that we want to have execute. Let's look at some of these. This one is when you enter paragraph 1, when you put your mouse over that, the thing that has an ID of paragraph 1, an alert box is going to appear. So we put it up, boom, the alert box appears. My suggestion is that you can use JavaScript or jQuery for any assignments that require JavaScript from here on out. All right. We have a few specific jQuery exercises that we're going to do that you need to use jQuery for. But after that, if I don't specify how to implement something client-side, you can use jQuery or just plain old JavaScript. Now, the important thing is how to make this work. How to make this work, you have to load the library of JavaScript. Your browser doesn't understand jQuery on its own. All right. All jQuery is a list of is a set of JavaScript functions that you can use to simplify your JavaScript. And for example, this is the location of it. We can actually see what the jQuery functions are. There's a mess of them. All right. The reason we can't read this is because this is using a minimized version of it. A minimized version of it gets rid of all the line feeds, right? Normally, we don't need to look at the code in jQuery, so it doesn't matter if this is hard to read, but we need to include those libraries. So it gets rid of all the unnecessary spaces and line feeds, so it's a shorter file to download. If we did want to see all of the detail of jQuery, we could go like this. And this shows you all the stuff that's actually in jQuery. And as you can notice, these are just JavaScript functions. There's a lot of them. They might be confusing, but it's still just plain old JavaScript. Now you can do one of two things. You can either include this file using the URL, or you can download the file to your machine and use the downloaded file wherever it went to. Did I screw something up? Oh, there it is. How come I can't see it on the screen? Weird. But anyhow, it downloads that. So you can either download the library yourself to your web server, or you can use the URL to link to it. So practice this. I know as students, you want to get through your assignments as quickly as possible. All right, I understand it. I want to get through my work as quickly as possible as well. All right, but it might benefit you to go back and try to redo the first couple of assignments using jQuery and see how much easier it is to do it. All right, maybe some cases it'll be easier. Maybe some cases you might think it's harder. All right, you can always use JavaScript in addition to jQuery. All right. The next thing I want to look at specifically is what is known as Jquery Ui. There's a couple of additions to jQuery. I don't know if the one we're going to talk about in this class or not, but it's called Jquery Mobile, which allows you to sort of style your web page to look like a mobile application. So if you bring up your web page in a mobile device, it will actually sort of look like a mobile application, which is kind of cool. All right. But there also is Jquery Ui, which allows you to do some of the common things that you do in user interfaces very simply. So, for example, we click on Jquery Ui, custom set of user interface interactions, and so on and so forth. And we can look at certain things, some of the widgets and interactions. We'll look at these in no particular order. You can make something draggable. So you can allow the users to reposition things on their screen. You can make something resizable. So I could have, for example, a news article this big that shows a little bit of the text. And if the user wanted to resize it to make it bigger, we could resize that. All right, those are a couple of interactions. As far as widgets go, one of them that we have is tabs. Now, you might get angry with me when you see how easy it is to do this in jQuery. Because if we view the source, all we have to do is this. This is the entirety of the jQuery code that implements tabs. All right? Think in your mind of what you did to get tabs on your web page. You did more than this in JavaScript. Now, to be sure, we have to download a couple of things. Just like jQuery, Jquery Ui has its own library of functions that we have to download. All right? So just as JavaScript or jQuery is built on top of JavaScript, Jquery Ui is built on top of jQuery. So therefore, we need to download or use somehow the UI JavaScript. And there also is a couple, there is a style sheet that goes along with it that sort of allows you things to look nice. So like we could get rid of this and would have tabs working, but it wouldn't look as cool as it does up here. Another thing, yeah, go ahead. No, that is actually their style sheet. So in other words, what this is demonstrating is jQuery has its, or jQuery UI has a style sheet associated with it, but you can also include your own style sheet. Good question. Well, what the heck? Let's download it and find out. I have a feeling we might need I have a feeling we might need the, what do I want to say? CSS part as well. But we'll find out. Good question. First of all, let's test to make sure it works. I have run into a couple of problems on this site where if you download their code, there's like a small error in it, which I know is very frustrating. If you run into one of those where you download their code and it doesn't work, let me know. Because like one of them, for example, I think forgot the HTTP colon in front of it. But at any rate, we can see this. All right, what's going on here? Are we getting an error? File not found. Okay, I understand this one not being found. So let's get rid of this one because we don't have their style sheet. Oh, that's how it implements it without. Oh, it can't find this. Oh, that's themes. We can get rid of that too. So to answer your question, without the style sheets, the functionality will be there, but the appearance will not be right. So you need the style sheets to style them in a correct way. So if I would have downloaded their CSS file, then it would have looked like it did on the page. There's also what's called an accordion control. An accordion control is when you show one thing, hide all the rest. It's almost like a tab, but it's sort of a different way to show a tab. All right. The tabs are sort of, or the things you click on are sort of stacked vertically instead of horizontally. Now there's some options that we can do. This is the default functionality. There's what's called collapsible content, and that allows us to collapse all of them. The way the default functionality is one of them has to be open. If we say collapse content, then we can click a second time and we can close everything. All right. Is that a good idea or not? Depends on the problem you're trying to solve, right? You as a web designer have to decide, do I always want to show something, or do you want to show something only depending on if they've clicked on it? They have something like this, if I'm not mistaken. I hope I'm not wrong. On some of the pages on LC's website. Expand, you see that? This actually allows for multiple things to be displayed. And I'm not sure if there's an option for that in jQuery. Custom icons. If you don't want the default of the little like downward pointing caret, you can put your own icons there. Fill space. You can sort of make it be a fixed space. If you notice initially, some of them took bigger space than the others. If you only have a constrained space to come in, you might want to use this. No auto height. I'm not exactly sure what that does compared to the default. And finally, sortable, where you can drag these things around if you want to. So with every widget, there's like some options that come with it. So we can look at the source to see. In this case, let's read this jQuery. All right. We're defining a function. All right. We're selecting all of the accordion, all the things with an ID of accordion. And we're finding in there all the divs that have an H3 in it. So that's the accordion part of it. We're then making it sortable, and we're supplying these things to actually do the sorting. With tabs also, you can change it to say open on mouse over instead of on mouse click. And here, they changed it by adding that event option of mouse over. So for each of these, there's options that you can do to sort of tweak the exact capability. Oh, collapsible is the same thing sort of that we had with the accordion control. With collapsible, we can click on the tab again and make it make all the tabs invisible. And that's done by simply adding this option to it. All right, I think you have one lab where you have to change lab 1 to add some content to it and use jQuery to make tabs. You have another lab where you are to take that lab and implement an accordion control. Let me look at the accordion control quickly, because this might be the one that has a bug in it. Yes. If I were to download this, oh yeah, this is the one I can't find. It's going to warn me that it can't find actually it can't find this because it's missing the HTTP colon. So if you use this as an example, HTTPS colon, if you use this as an example, be aware that there is this bug in their code. All right. That's sort of the summary of jQuery and jQuery UI. Another thing that is available is, as I mentioned, jQuery Mobile. And the idea with jQuery Mobile is the same. It's an add-on to jQuery. And you can either download it or you can point to it. Let's look for examples. Okay, the jQuery Mobile Gallery. Okay, IKEA. And specifically, let's go and make the page size for a Samsung Galaxy. This kind of gives it a mobile look and feel. Kind of looks like a mobile app. What I did, by the way, is if you open up Developers Tools, this little icon here allows you to set different configurations to emulate different situations. Like that would be for an iPhone SE and so on. That's very useful. That way you don't have to make sure you have every device on earth to test your code with. Notice how, again, it makes it more of a mobile looking thing because on a desktop, there's 2 columns. If I go to a mobile view of it, 2 columns is generally not a good idea. For a mobile device, and therefore it turns it into 1 column. All right. This segues well into, and then again, you can look at this for more details about how to use it. Demos, that's what I wanted. This page itself is actually done in jQuery Mobile, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go with layout, responsive. And again, notice how it looks different if we view it on an emulated iPhone. All right. This segues well into the notion of responsive web design. And essentially, responsive web design means your web page is sensitive to and responsive to the environment in which it's contained. So in other words, it matters where the page is being displayed. Is it being displayed on a mobile device, or is it being displayed on a desktop? Or is it being displayed on a tablet? All right. There are sort of three big things with mobile, with responsive design. And responsive design, by the way, is not just for mobile. It's for people with bigger or smaller screens. All right. And I urge you to test your pages not just on the default window size on your machine, but resize the window and see if it looks good. All right. I notice a lot of people, when they turn in assignments, I can almost tell how big their window was, because there's like one window width where it looks perfect. And if I make any other window width, stuff overlaps each other or it doesn't look quite as good. All right. There's three sort of principles of responsive web design. Number one, use percentages for widths of things. So don't say that something is 600 pixels wide. Say something takes up 90% of the screen, or 100% of the screen, or 50% of the screen. All right. Associated with that is oftentimes a minimum or maximum width. All right. For example, if you had an image that was 300 pixels big, well, let's make it 600 pixels big, and you were resizing your screen, and I said the picture is 100% of the available space, that's going to work up to 600 pixels screen width. Beyond that, you're actually resizing the image to be bigger than it actually is, which means you're going to slightly distort it. So you might say in a case like that, with 100%, maximum width 600 pixels. Then it wouldn't size any bigger than 600 pixels. You can also specify a minimum width. Like, I don't care how you know, it's 20% of the screen, but I don't care how small you make the screen. Don't make the image less than 100 pixels or something like that. So let's look at this example that I created. I did the same thing sort of two different ways. And here's the website. This is cool. This uses a flow layout or a grid layout. I can't quite remember. We'll see in a minute. Notice this section. Here's another section and another one. This only displays on desktop only, and this one only displays on desktop only. Because you might want to limit not just the appearance of the page, but the content based on whether you're on a mobile device or not. All right. There might be some extra stuff that you would want on a desktop page where there's plenty of space that you wouldn't want on a mobile page. Now, as we make this narrower, notice these things get closer together and smaller up to a certain point. And then, boom, once it hits that break point, it looks like this. Now this is based solely on the width, and the assumption is that from the width we can sort of tell if it's mobile or a desktop. And even if it is a desktop, if it gets narrower than a certain amount, we want it to act like a mobile page. So if we run our mobile emulator, we can see that, boom, that's what it would look under the iPhone SE. And so on. All right, let's see how we make this happen. I'm going to look at the HTML of one of the pages. Notice I have two CSS files. That's okay, right? It's okay to have two CSS files. If you have two CSS files, which one overrules? The one that comes last. All right? The one that comes last overrules the ones that came earlier. So I have two style sheets, main.css, and then I have one called desktop CSS. Let's take out this desktop CSS for a moment. We take that out and save it. No matter how wide the screen is, it looks like the mobile version. So my initial CSS file styles it the way I want it to look like on a mobile device. And then I add on to that the differences if I want it to look like, if the screen's wider than a certain width. So I'm adding the enhancements to this in the case of a desktop browser. This is called progressive enhancement. And you don't necessarily even need two. You could do something for screens that are at least 800 pixels wide and do something for screens that are at least 1200 pixels wide, and so on. I just did two because why not? The link for the style sheet looks the same, except there's one extra feature on it, a media query. This says that apply the style sheet if the display is a screen and the width of the screen is at least 800 pixels. So 800 and above, it will use the style sheet. And what does the style sheet contain? Well, it contains all the enhancements for a desktop browser. A background image. It uses a grid layout. It makes the borders look fancier. It puts all the attributes of the grid. And it changes the style of desktop-only classes to display of block. If we look at the original style sheet, desktop only has a style of none. So what that is saying is, remember those couple of sections that we said only appear in the desktop view? Here's another section, here's another. There's 5 sections on this page. We go to the smaller view of it. 1, 2, 3, 2 sections only, or 3 sections. Yeah, 3 sections. So we can hide content simply by doing something like this. This is known as progressive enhancement. Progressive enhancement means we style our initial style sheet to work for sort of the lowest level device possible. So that would be a mobile phone. Depending how far back we go, we could design it to work like for a flip phone and maybe have no CSS at all and only have CSS if it's at least, you know, maybe some of the criteria. All right. In that case, in a mobile, in a flip phone, the pages would look just like the first few pages we did in CISS232. Very, very, very basic. But if someone's using a flip phone to surf the web, they probably don't care about being cutting edge. All right. So therefore, we give them a basic web page. At least we're showing it to them. All right. They can still use it. It can still function. At any rate, the first spreadsheet the first style sheet that we defined is sort of our baseline. Mobile devices get this. The lowest level devices that we're going to address get this. And then we build on top of that enhancements for larger and larger screens. That is what's known as progressive enhancement. And again, we don't just have to have 2 levels. We could have a 3rd level or a 4th level or a 5th level if we wanted to. So we could build a page that looked one way on a mobile phone, a different way on a tablet, and still a different way on a desktop machine. But we start with the baseline being the lowest level device. Now, sort of the opposite of progressive enhancement is called graceful degradation. And here's an article about it. Graceful degradation is when you start out with the assumption that it's going to be viewed on a desktop. Then you scale it down for a tablet. Then you scale it down for a mobile device, scale it down for a flip phone. Progressive enhancement works the opposite way. So it really depends on what your baseline is and whether you're adding stuff or taking away stuff. Now let's just think about this for a second. Which of those 2 approaches do you think is better to take most of the time? Progressive enhancement. Why? Because it's easier to add stuff than take stuff away. All right. The analogy that people give is, let's say you wanted to have 2 snacks at your Super Bowl party. You wanted to have peanut M&Ms, or your own version of peanut M&Ms, and you wanted to have peanuts. It'd be much easier to buy peanuts and then take some of them as is and take some of them and coat them with the candy covering to make your own peanut M&Ms. It's easier to do that than to start out with peanut M&Ms and chip away the candy coating to get to a peanut. All right. Or if you just wanted the cake and no icing, it's easier and better to bake the cake, take maybe part of it with no icing for the people that don't like icing, and then add icing to the other part. It's better to add stuff to something basic than take away stuff for something complex. Now, when might you use graceful degradation? Yes?
Maybe it's like when designing a application like web app, it's primarily going to be suitable for desktop or tablet.
That would be one case where you knew most of your users were going to be on a desktop, and you just wanted to make sure it worked great for that, but you wanted to at least have it be functional on a mobile device. That would be one example, if you knew something about the user base. The other example is where your starting point is. For example, if you already had a successful website, all right, and it was built for the desktop because it was built in I don't know, 2008 or something like that. All right, this is a far-fetched example maybe, but maybe not. So you have an older website that looks great on a desktop, but you need to scale it down for a mobile. So it depends where your starting point is. If you're starting with something complex, then scale it down. But if you're doing it from scratch, all things being equal, you probably want to use the progressive enhancement. I did this, I showed the media query, right? Yeah, this is a media query. We're including this style sheet, but only including it for whether it's a screen. Screen sort of means no, not a mobile device, means a computer screen. And minimum width is at least 800 pixels big. So this media query takes all of this style sheet and puts it in there in this condition and leaves it out if it doesn't meet that condition. Now there's a slightly different way to do the same thing, and that's to embed your media queries inside the style sheet. Notice this is going to work like the same way. Yeah, there's only one style sheet, only one main CSS. Well, okay, I stand corrected. There's a desktop CSS, but we actually only need one of these. This was copied over. And if we look at this, all we really need is the main CSS. So we can get rid of the desktop CSS because all we're really using is the main CSS. So every page gets the main CSS file. Let's look at that main CSS file. Inside that main CSS file, we have a media query sort of embedded in it. If we're on a screen if we're on a computer screen that is at least 800 pixels wide, add these things. Effectively, that's the same example from the other one. All right, same example from the other one, where we had the two style sheets. I just brought the other style sheet into this style sheet and put a media query. So media query can be on the link, or the media query can be inside of the style sheet. Which is better? I honestly don't know. I don't know which one I like better. I think there's benefits to, this is just a matter of personal preference. I can't like say, oh, this one's a lot better because they both work. They both can be used to do the same thing. It's just, do you want to worry about two style sheets, or do you want to worry about having one style sheet that's a little more complicated because it contains media queries in it? You get to choose your poison there. All right. I will enable this example on Canvas so you can take a look at it and study it. Play with these things, make changes and see what happens if I make the width not 800 but 400 or 600. How does it change and how does it affect it? All right. Any questions? All right, we'll see you upstairs. Oh, I didn't want to do that. I don't want to do that.